Welcome to Everyday Cooking with Ann Sigurd. Today we're going to make old-fashioned white bread. Okay, today I'm going to show you something else, and most of us are quarantined at some time or another, and so I'm showing you how to make this bread recipe. It's old-fashioned, it is really delicious. I'm showing you today because I had a hard time finding yeast, the same granulated yeast rather than the instant yeast, which I'm not familiar with, but this is called fresh compressed yeast. And it works just like regular granulated yeast. So we're going to be using the fresh compressed. I'm going to come over here and I'm going to put 1/2 a cup of about quite warm water. It's about 110 degrees. You don't want it too hot. You just get used to kind of knowing if you need to measure it, but it's about, and I'm going to only have 1/2 a cup. This recipe that I'm using today, I'm having the recipe. In other words, it makes usually 4 cups of bread, but I'm only making 2. So I'm doing 1/2 of the recipe. I'm going to put this compressed yeast in here with a little bit of sugar to activate it. So I'm going to kind of just mash it around with a fork a little bit. And let that bubble up and activate while we're getting everything else ready. So I'm going to let that sit for a little bit. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is put the wet ingredients in my bowl. So I've got 1.5 cups of warm milk here, not hot but warm, so that it will dissolve with the, actually that's 3 tablespoons of sugar, and this is, it already looks like it's hardened up a little bit, but that's why I'm going to put this in as well. 1/3 cup melted Crisco shortening. Okay. So this is going to melt in here as well. Okay, in this bowl I have 4.5 cups of bread flour. You want to use bread flour if you can at all possible because it has a higher gluten content, like 12% protein, and this makes lighter, fluffier, better breads. If you don't have that, you can use regular flour. It's just not going to be as light and fluffy. So if you can use the bread flour, that would work best. Okay, and by the way I make bread is I use the wet ingredients first, and then I add the bread as I go, the flour as I go along. I might not necessarily use all of this flour here, or I might need a little bit more. Today's a rainy day, so depending on humidity and other factors, you just have to go by the feel and look of where it's supposed to be rather than dumping all your bread in. I'm going to start now by just putting in one or 2 cups right now, actually about 1 cup, and mix it up. It's always really like lumpy at first. That's okay because it all works out in the end. Okay, I'm going to put my 2nd cup. Oh, you know, I did mix my salt in there. I don't know if I showed you that or not, but I have my salt mixed in with my flour. So I'm going to put the 2nd cup of flour in. Now the interesting thing about this recipe that's maybe a little different from some of the other recipes that you've tried or looked at online is that we're going to mix this up. And then we are going to add our yeast. Now we're going to wait a couple of minutes. I want it to bubble up a little bit better. Okay, our yeast is ready. Our yeast mixed with our water, a little bit of sugar is all bubbled up. And I'm going to add it to our flour mixture here. And beat this vigorously. I can smell the yeast. You definitely know that it's fresh yeast because you can really smell it here. Just a little bit more flour. Now, the interesting thing about this recipe is that I am going to let this now rest with a spoon in it for 1/2 hour before we add the rest of the flour and knead the dough and get it prepared for the pans. You can see my bread, it has been raising for 1/2 hour with just half of the flour ingredients. It has the milk and the salt, the sugar, the shortening that's been melted, and we're now going to add the rest of the flour, and then we're going to start kneading it. So I'm gonna beat this down one more time. This kind of looks like almost like a sourdough bread at this point because it's very spongy. So I'm going to add a little bit more flour right now. And now mostly I'm going to be doing it by feel to see how much I need. Just scrape around the edges and incorporate the flour. I've been kneading the dough for about 10 minutes now, and it's nice and beautiful, ready to put in the bowl, which I have put butter in the bottom and around the sides so that it won't stick. And I'm going to go ahead and put some plastic wrap. I'm going to put a dish towel over the top as well. I'm going to put this in my oven right now because I have a breadproof button that I can put it on here. And I'm going to put it in here for about an hour. We want it to double in size. So we'll take it out in about an hour and show you what it looks like then. Okay, our dough has risen for about an hour, a little bit more than that, and it's double in size. My proofing from my proofing button on my oven, so it was just slightly warm. And so now I'm going to get it ready to punch down and put a shape into loaves. So I just want to take it here and just take it out of the bowl. I'm going to be making this into 2 different loaves. I'm going to roll it out a little bit. You can see how nice and smooth it is. I'm going to cut it in half. Doesn't have to be exact. I'm just going to kind of roll it over a little bit. Squeeze it in a little bit to get the bubbles out. Roll it in here a little bit. Now I'm going to put this in the pan. And we're going to flatten it out a little bit in here. And let that raise just until it is over the top. Okay, I'm going to show you the final product. What we did was we let the bread raise for about an hour, so it was just mounded a little bit over the top. And then we put it in the oven for 350 degrees for 35 minutes. It's perfectly beautifully browned right now. This is what a couple of the slices of the other loaf that we made. You can see how spongy and light and fluffy. Using milk in this recipe makes this a very soft crust. I buttered the top with butter. I wanted to mention one more thing is if you don't have the compressed yeast like I used before, I like the Red Star brand yeast, and you can use regular granulated yeast in your bread as well. So this is the final product. I love eating my bread with some apricot jam, or you might like honey and butter, or peanut butter and honey. Either way, you can slice it as for bread for sandwiches or for whatever, however you like to serve it.